Good day. President Donald Trump has one obsession. He has not hidden it from the very time he became president in this his new iteration. He wants to win the Nobel Prize, or at least he wants to be awarded the Nobel Prize. He has become beholden to the Nobel Prize, and he has said it many times that he deserves to be awarded the Nobel Prize because, as he sees it, he is a man of peace. This obsession with the Nobel Prize may not be unconnected with the fact that President Obama won the Nobel Prize in 2009, October. He was awarded the Nobel Prize just 8 months into his presidency. The Nobel Committee then said that they were awarding the very young and new president the Nobel Prize because of his extraordinary effort to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between people. A lot of people were surprised by that award, especially, and the person who was the most surprised was Obama himself. Obama went on to oversee quite a lot of things. He inherited the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he continued with it. He even, I think there was a surge. But it was what he did in Libya, what he did in Somalia, and what he did in Yemen, where he bombed these countries and led to the overthrow of Gaddafi, and how he instigated and created so much problems in the Middle East that also led to the crisis in Syria. Obama's legacy was one of destruction of so much countries, including in Africa and in the Middle East. Obama was very destructive. He didn't deserve that Nobel Prize. In this time now, President Donald Trump says he deserves this Nobel Prize. In fact, his press secretary the other day was saying that President Trump deserves the Nobel Prize for a number of reasons. He stopped the Israel-Iran war. He intervened in the Cambodian war. He intervened between Pakistan and India when they had Operation Sindor. For that, he deserves the Nobel Prize. By the reckoning of Caroline Leavitt, his press secretary, who was addressing journalists a few days ago. But some actions really put doubt. And one monumental action may condemn President Trump to being the person who may be not deserving of the Nobel Prize, but the one who may just inadvertently start World War III. And not just World War III, a nuclear World War III. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ibima Amungo's perspective on global affairs. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the opinions I express in this video, please put them in the comment section. Please also do well to like and share. Today, it emerged that President Trump has done something very monumental and significant. He has escalated his rhetoric and the trolling he has been having between himself and former President Medved of Russia. Today, he said, based on highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chair of the Security Council of Russia Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you very much. President Trump has also gone ahead to state that these nuclear submarines have been sent very close to Russia. Nuclear submarines that America have are some of the best technology. They are almost untraceable. And one of the things that the Americans pride themselves with is that as their nuclear deterrent, or their own way of one of their nuclear triads, the nuclear submarines they possess, I think are the most effective and the most dangerous amongst them, especially the Virginia class submarines, nuclear powered submarines. These are lethal weapons. These are destructive weapons. These are weapons that signify a very big escalation. And it's a threat that no doubt the Russians will be looking to. President Trump says that the recent back and forth he's been having with Medvedev, especially since Medvedev told him that Russia is not Iran, neither is it Israel. And you should remember the dead hand that the Russians have, which is a mechanism by which they can still trigger a nuclear attack on any country, even if their leadership has been decapitated. Russians have that capacity and that capability, and even though the Russians have not overtly stated it, many people believe they still have that. And this trolling by Medvedev has finally got to Trump, and he has taken this very, very decisive action. Just a few days ago, President Putin, just 2 days ago, announced that a weapon system that the Russians has developed and tested once, a weapon system that struck fear in many people's hearts, the Oreshnik, is now in mass production. In fact, the first of them have been deployed to some of the Russian units that will be controlling them. Soon, I think before the end of this year, there will be forward deployment to Belarus, where they will act as deterrent against the Europeans and NATO particularly. So this is where we find ourselves now. Escalation, escalation, and escalation. And it just takes one misunderstanding for there to be conflagration, possibly nuclear conflagration. The Russians have become a very dogged and steadfast community. They have faced this adversity in over several centuries. They faced the wrath of Napoleon's troops. 600,000 troops were sent by Napoleon, was led by Napoleon into Russia. Moscow was devastated, but the Russians prevailed because they moved east. Same happened also with Hitler. Hitler came into Russia, defeated them, killed quite a lot of civilians, 25 million of them, and 3 million soldiers. In the long run, the Russians defeated them. For the past 2 years, or 3 years, the Russians have had a war that they have practically been fighting with NATO, using the hands and the bodies and the personnel of Ukraine to fight this war. Lavrov said recently that the new reality is that for the very first time in their history, they are fighting the whole collective West. The Russians have become sensitized to an environment that has made Lavrov to even go further and say that with all the rhetoric going on in Europe, especially in Germany, Russia may just be facing the Fourth Reich completely. This is how Russians feel about what's going on now. And then President Trump escalates and says he's deploying nuclear submarines close to Russia. Already there's a lot of activity going on around Russia. The Russians have mentioned that there's a lot of activities going on in the Baltic Sea. They have full control of the Black Sea. They see it, and I think it's not a safe area for NATO to play, even though Turkey is a very close NATO ally. But that area is covered. The Russians have it. But in the Baltic Sea is the place they have a problem with. And now that Azerbaijan is entering into the fray, there may be some underhand things going on in the Caspian Sea. So the Russians are beginning to be very sensitive. Recently, their investments in their own nuclear submarine arsenal started to grow. The nuclear submarine arsenal of Russia may not be as sophisticated as that of the Americans, but the Russians have shown one thing. They don't believe in sophisticated weaponry. They believe in numbers and effectiveness, as they have shown with artillery systems that they built, which may not have been as accurate and as scientifically advanced as that of the NATO countries, but were very effective. They came out in numbers and they had ability to produce these artillery systems. 155 millimeter shells. They produced them in abundance and overwhelmed NATO and all the weapon systems NATO sent to Ukraine. They couldn't stand it. Even this same thing too has happened with drones. They started slowly and now they have overwhelming numbers of Guarantee drones they send out to say hello to the Ukrainians almost every night, unrelentingly. Recently, it has dropped in numbers because for a month ago, the waves were in 400s per night. The last two waves of drone attacks on Ukraine was just 100 and 150. But they were targeted. They were very specific. They have been concentrating on some specific places where they believe that Patriot missiles are located and also where they believe NATO officers are helping to train the Ukrainians. So the Russians may be looking at all this now and be wondering what's going on in the world now. What is really going on? President Trump has said that he's going to give them a few more days, the Russians, a few more days to come to the table to before negotiate, or else he's going to put excruciating sanctions on them. This may just be making all the people who support Ukraine very happy, because all they've always wanted is that they have these growls against Putin and they want Putin changed. The refrain of wanting Putin changed was also repeated by Zelensky recently. Zelensky said in one of his, during the celebration of the 50th anniversary of some event in Helsinki, he said that it's time for them to possibly change the regime in Russia. He specifically wants Putin to be removed. And he also said that the $300 billion that is frozen assets of Russia should not be just frozen. It should be seized and it should be given to Ukraine for reconstruction. He's saying this at a time that the Russians are just announcing that they have taken full control of the Ukrainian province of Chasiv. He's saying this also at the time that Pokrovsk is in big trouble. The Russians have moved into the inside of the city and are slowly moving, occupying territory and occupying large swathes of Pokrovsk. He's saying this also at the time that the Russians are in Kupiansk, they're in Zaporizhia, and they are also disrupting a lot of the operations being led by British interests, MI6 interests, and British officers supporting the Ukrainians. The Russians are mounting operations against them, arresting them, getting them, and in most cases, just blowing them up. The Europeans don't seem to want to make a big announcement of the fact that they are losing personnel in Ukraine in the hands of the Russians. So President Trump coming out and saying that he has deployed 2 submarines, nuclear submarines, to Russia is a very dangerous escalation in all that possibly could go wrong. He has shown that even though the rhetoric is that he wants to win the Nobel Prize, he also needs to show that he's tough. He did that with the Houthis. He deployed the American aircraft carrier fleet to the Red Sea and engaged the Houthis, bombed them for over a month. But all it took was the Houthis to start sending hypersonic missiles the way of the aircraft carrier, and they bolted away from there. He did that also when he has also shown toughness when he sanctioned an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities in Natanz, in Fordo, and Isfahan. They were bombed by Americans using B-2 bombers, but nothing came out of that. The Iranians suffered destruction, but nobody even knows if their nuclear program was wiped out. Trump needs to show toughness. There is something interesting about America in the past few years. America has engaged in some wars. They've engaged in the Afghanistan war. They've engaged in the war against Saddam Hussein, the first one and the second one, the one led by George Bush Sr., That was the one to push out the Iraqis from Kuwait, and then the one initiated by George Bush, which was a claim that Al Qaeda was in Iraq, or Iraq was developing weapons of mass destruction, and that was the excuse they used in getting into Iraq, and for George Bush Junior to go and start his own war against Iraq. They have had a lot of engagements with countries you won't consider to be within the peer in terms of technology, in terms of know-how, in terms of machinery, military machinery. They bombed Yugoslavia under the framework of NATO, but they led it. They bombed Yugoslavia until they broke up Yugoslavia. They bombed Serbia also later on and helped the creation of Kosovo. They've had these engagements, and all these years the Russians stayed away from them, because at that time, for 30 years, Russians wanted to be part of the West, wanted good relationship with the West. So even though the interest of Russia was being infringed upon in Serbia, in Yugoslavia, in countries that Russia had strong and close affiliations with, they did not do much. But there was a time when the Russians didn't say anything, but now they are saying something. And there was a time that the Americans were very good in engaging with countries that were not near to them. But since Biden escalated it. For whatever reason, I believe for personal hatred of Putin, because he has always had a history with Putin, because he has been in politics for over 45 years or 47 years before he became president. He looked down on Putin and he felt that he can engage Putin. And for the first time, he led America to a near peer adversary, and the consequences was not too nice. They have not helped Ukraine at all. American weaponry has been destroyed in the Ukrainian war front, and all the advice and help of NATO has not helped Ukraine at all in any form or manner. This is the first time America is facing, on a one-on-one, a near peer competitor. But a nuclear escalation between Russia and America would not be good for the world, because Russia is the leading power regarding nuclear arsenal in the world. Russia has over 7,000 confirmed warheads. All these strategic arms limitation talks to try and bring down the levels of arms and levels of missiles and all the kinds of intermediate missiles and all those ones have just been thrown away. The last agreement was cancelled, ironically, by Trump, the Intermediate Nuclear Treaty. And since then, the Russians have developed the Oreshnik, which is a weapon so devastating that Putin said it was not even necessary to place a warhead on it, even though it can carry 6 warheads. That it is such a devastating weapon that even in its conventional form, it has the destructive power of a tactical nuclear bomb. That is just the kind of power Oreshnik has, and they're creating them now as a mass-produced weaponry. We should understand that in the past 3 years, the Russians have elevated their game. They have invested in their military-industrial complex, deployed it, improved it, and now they are outputting weaponry at a rate that is quite alarming. Despite all the plans and all the rhetoric about increasing spending to 5% by NATO, and all the plans of Germany to increase their spending to $150 billion, the Russians are already doing it. Those ones are planning to do it. They are planning, and that plan still probably may not see the light of day, because for most of these Europeans, they are suffering excruciating economic conditions. Their growth rate is just in the regions of 1%. The growth rate of Russia these days is around 4% to 5%, just one notch below that of the Chinese. And the partnership with the Chinese may not necessarily be that the Chinese are giving them weaponry, but the Chinese are giving them equipment, CNC machinery, computer numerical controlled machines that can help in creating precision equipment, precision parts. I see the rate of development of parts. Every single advantage the West used to have was because they had access to this kind of machines, CNC machines that makes parts. And now the Russians have access to those machines at an industrial scale. The other day we saw when the Russians deployed and showed us a video of their mass production of the Geran 2 drones. It was a massive factory. And we don't know how many of those factories they have. Every day, the Russians are the Sukhoi and the United Aircraft Company are bringing out new Sukhoi 35, new Sukhoi 57, and also the strategic bomber, even though there are not much of them, the Tu-160. The Russians have stepped up their game. The other day, a new nuclear submarine was launched. And now that Trump is saying this thing, even though he's just saying that he's going to deploy or he has deployed these submarines close to the Russians, in the midst of trying to negotiate with the Russians, it sends some crazy signals as to the Russians. They just may not know what kind of a character he is, so they may just decide to stay safe. It may just be that they won't want to wait until they are struck. They too may be taking actions to position Russian assets around America. Already, the other day, Russia and Chinese warplanes were seen practicing and doing drills close to Hawaii, close to Alaska. They soon may be close to California. And who knows if they are even close to the eastern seaboard. Because when it comes to submarines, there's just a limit. And while we know the technology America has, many people don't know the technology the Russians have. The Russians have not shown us that they are lacking in technology or know-how. This is a country who, for almost 20 years, were the only source by which America got to space, into the International Space Program. This is the only country that continues to do things, even while in COVID, when people thought that it was either the Pfizer or the people were finding a way to get COVID medicine. The Russians put out COVID before anybody. The Sputnik, Putin even took that COVID shot just to show the world that this thing. And what did we see? The British, using their big instrument of BBC, did all they could to discredit it, but it was the Sputnik that ended up saving quite a lot of people in Central Asia. The Russians are very innovative. They are good in science, good in mathematics, and good in STEM. And when we talk about peace at this time, and one person who says he wants to win the Nobel Prize gives indications like this, that is ready to deploy nuclear weapons to nuclear submarines to the side of Russia, we really don't know where we're going to. It is a big escalation, a big threat, and we don't know whether it will blow up in our faces. It might lead to an escalation, and it might lead to something running out of control. This is where I end my video for today. If you have any comments regarding the opinion I have expressed, if you think that Trump is playing a very too pushful a hand or too strong a hand, or if you think that he is being fair in taking this move, whatever opinions you have about this move by President Trump, please put them in the comment section. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and like and share until I see you in my next video. Goodbye.